Happy to be here and talk a little bit about the ecosystem of the future as we usually look at it. You might know that we are for quite some time working in this kind of context since more than 4 years. We are trying to understand the developments in that ecosystem. And this is also the reason why we, on a yearly basis, publish some data points. We call it the Quantum Technology Monitor. And this is something I will talk about in a minute. Just to give you a quick idea, so what we are doing, so we are basically working in that ecosystem and supporting clients from strategic advice to really supporting them in the development of certain algorithms and use cases. So from strategy to, I would almost say, get our fingers dirty. When it comes to the Quantum Technology Monitor, a couple of remarks up front. It's, I would say, a very in-depth research which is standing behind, which is based on a number of interactions we are having with research institutions, with academia, and of course with leaders in that space. All the data which are related to China are based on what is publicly available and what you can get out of that ecosystem. It's not as transparent as other geographies are, so it's hard to really understand the details here. When we talk about the quantum ecosystem, then we speak about quantum technologies. So it is including quantum computing, but it's also including quantum sensing, and of course also including quantum communication. So we try to really understand the full picture here. And just to be very clear, in our perspective, this is an ecosystem in the making. There is still some way to go, and I think we heard and learned in different presentations, especially today, then that it is still far from being a hype. I think it's we are just at the beginning, which is great. There's a lots of momentum. And what we see is definitely high activity, but when it comes to technological advancements, there is still some way to go. So looking into the ecosystem, we usually look into, let's say, 4 main areas. And at the end of the presentation, we will present you a QR code, so you can then also download the full report where you also find all the numbers. So it's publicly available. Of course, you can take pictures, but if you want to have the full report, just download it. It's not a big deal. So when we design the report, we usually look into, let's say, 4 main areas. One is, of course, what is happening in terms of investments in that ecosystem. And as you can see, there are some big numbers behind. So the overall size of the ecosystem, given the fundings which have been assigned to this ecosystem, is in the range of 6.9 billion, which is a huge amount of money. There are a big amount of companies and startups in that ecosystem. Whether they are exactly 350 or 400, it doesn't matter, but it's in that range. And as you can see, we are counting startups in all 3 areas. The next category which we try to better understand is, of course, the value in that ecosystem, and we distinguish between the market size of the quantum technology ecosystem itself. So that's the line on the upper right. So where we try to size the ecosystem itself, which means quantum computing, of course, is by far the largest. And we see a huge spread. This is, of course, dependent on how the different technologies, or is caused because of the uncertainty how the different technologies might evolve over time. But as you can see, quantum computing is by far the largest, and the other two are still substantial, but they're definitely a lot smaller. When it comes to potential economic value, we show just the number for quantum computing. The economic value, of course, is incredibly huge. And that is also the reason why I think we are all here, why we have all the different people from different industries being on stage talking about use cases. That's how we usually look at this kind of value figure. We try to understand the use cases. We try to, in different industries, we try to understand the value pools, and we of course try to understand the quantum computing impact on certain value pools it might have, and then do the calculation and an estimate, which then at a certain point in time sums up to this huge number. And I can tell you this is based on our current understanding of the ecosystem. So the number might even increase over time, the more we get insights into what might be possible over time. And then there are two other categories. So we are also trying to track the scientific progress. So what is happening in academia, in science on that side. So what is the patent activity? What is the activities in terms of Q2 publications? And of course, one very important last figure, we are trying to understand how is Q2 talent developing, and basically coming into that, entering this market. And what I can say here already is that especially on the talent piece, there is a huge gap and also a huge challenge ahead of us if we really want to make that real, what we are discussing here and what we are talking about. So the total annual Q2 startup investment last year hit basically all-time high. It's at almost the level of 2021, slightly higher. So that's the good news. It's a bit kind of plateauing. We are wondering how 2023 might look like. So you all are aware of what is going on in the in the investors community, and especially in the tech space. So let's see whether that might have some influence of the 2023 figures, but for 2022 the figure is still pretty high, and 75% of that amount is going into quantum computing. And despite those record investments, what we can say is that the rate of Q2 startup creation has slowed down in 2022, and as you can see, it looks like a nice wave. So some could say, yeah, there is some slowdown in that ecosystem. Others say, okay, yes, the big inventions have been made already and brought to the I would say to the investors community, and that's the reason why we see this big hype in the 17th, 18th, 19th. So, and it's now slowing down a bit. What we also see is that the amount of money which is going into startups is actually being reduced, and the amount of money which is going into scale-ups is in some areas even growing. So overall, it tells you that the activity of founding new startups is, at least from the data points we have, is showing a slowdown here a bit. 80% of the startups founded in the past 3 years are again in the QC space. When we look at the different layers, so starting from, or the value chain, starting from equipment to hardware, to system software, application software, and services, just on a very, let's say, simplistic way. We have it in more detail in the background. But what we can see is that the highest number of startup activity is currently in application software. But if you look into the share of funding which is going into those areas, the highest amount of course is going into hardware, and that's actually pretty clear. It's quite expensive to come up with new hardware developments. I think everybody who is involved in this kind of topic knows exactly what I'm talking about. We are here easily talking about hundreds of millions which need to be invested into certain hardware developments to really make it a reality. In terms of projection, when we look a little bit further down the road, we see some indications, and this is something we also see in other ecosystems, especially in the tech-driven ecosystems, that there is some tendency that value is moving more and more into then the software space. So for now, what we can say is that especially in computing and also in communication, there's a lot of activity in hardware and components. This is also true for sensing. Sensing, there's very strong activity in sensing. But what we also see is, and you see it already on the numbers here, there's some movement on the application software side, and sooner or later this will then also start creating value, and that means that the anticipated evolution of value capture will move into that direction. When it comes to the different industries and the different economic value associated to a certain industry, we have done a fundamental research in different industries. We have looked into basically almost every industry and tried to understand what are potential use cases on one side. On the other side, what are the value pools, and from the third perspective, what is the related QC impact? And based on this calculation, we can see that especially in chemicals, life sciences, automotive, and financial services, there are, based on our current understanding, the highest activities and also the largest value pools. This is basically done based on coming from the client's perspective or the customer's perspective, so it's use case driven. It's not, let's say, hardware driven in that respect. So given the discussions we have heard over the day and yesterday, I think it's pretty clear we learned a lot about especially life sciences, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, chemistry. There's a lot going on in terms of material design, and that's also the reason why especially chemicals, life sciences is pretty strong in that figure here. Financial services, we had a separate panel here on financial services discussing the different use cases and impacts in that space, and I think it became clear that there are also some very important developments to come, which will have a substantial impact on financial services, and then also, of course, open up the respective value pools. We have also some numbers for other industries, but those are by far the largest. The overall size is in the range of 1.3 trillion, which is incredibly huge. Yeah. And I think that's why we're all here. This is the vision we have in mind. And if we are able to really open up that value pool, then we are all happy bunnies, I would say. Talent. This is, of course, a topic we should pay attention to, because this only will become reality if we have enough talent in that space. What we already can see is that there is a challenge ahead of us. So we just looked into active job postings, and we tried to understand, of course, number of quantum technology master degrees graduates on a yearly basis. And what you can see here is, if you just try to compare apples with apples, so, job posting in quantum and master degree in quantum, then there is a huge gap. Of course, there is the possibility to do kind of an upskilling. So of course, with an engineering degree or an math degree, you are also able to move into that space, but it needs a certain upskilling activities. So what we can say here is that the gap is still huge. It has slightly decreased over the last year, but as I said before, it is still pretty substantial. And we are currently also discussing with some of the European institutions what that basically means in terms of how to adapt and how to modify education. It really also means that, of course, in our education system, this needs to be considered. But on the other side, this will not be enough. Also, industries, corporations, they also need to start upskilling programs to basically help closing that gap. And we know from some of the large tech players that they are already starting those activities and investing a lot into this. So with this, I thank you very much for your attention. And as I promised, here you find the QR code. And if you are interested in a more intensive discussion on that topic and all other related topics in that respect, then please reach out to myself. I'm leading this on a global basis for McKinsey, and happy to stay in contact with all of you. Thank you very much. I think we have still 2 minutes for questions. If there is a quick question, I'm happy to respond even. Otherwise, we move on, I think.
I have a question about the market segments you have analyzed. So you talk about automotive, for instance, for industry, but not aeronautics or space industry. Did you explore also this market segment?
Yes. Yeah, in the study you will also see, this is just for the presentation purposes. We only show the largest ones, but in the study we have also looked into aerospace. We also looked into other segments. You will find them in the study.
You have discussed estimated value and investment size. Are there any estimates on market size today? What is the market size for quantum technologies?
The market size today is by far much smaller, as you can imagine. It's based on, so the only thing we can do is right now use the numbers which are moving into certain companies and the investment certain companies are doing. So if you look into the investments, as we have shown, you get an understanding where the market is right now, because economic value is not produced at the moment. So it's just investment in the ecosystem itself.